impression most of you have been through the developing the canvas section here. So this is in my slides, which again you can download. I'm going to go through this very, very quickly. So if you feel that it's going too fast, that's okay. It's meant to be. For those of you who've been through the book and been through the process, this is a reminder. For those of you who haven't, maybe I'll convince you to go buy the book and learn it, because it is a good set of techniques. But I want to go through this part quickly and then spend most of the next hour on the bottom part of that page. So in terms of developing the canvas, this is actually set up. It does not flow left to right, and that's on purpose. So it actually starts in the middle. You spend most of your time in the early stages up here, and then only then do you fill in the parts on the edge. So if you try to fill in the canvas from left to right, it won't make sense. So you'll start off with the value proposition. And again, if you've looked at the Steve Blank lectures, the value proposition is not about your product. It's about solving a problem. And the problem is something that the customer has a problem. You don't have a problem. Your problem is you don't have any money. You want to go get some of theirs. But the customer has a problem. You want to figure out what that problem is. And eventually that will turn into satisfying their need, which will develop a product. But you don't, if you're putting your product or your features in this first value proposition box, you're doing it wrong. So here's some mistakes people tend to make with value propositions. It's just a feature. It belongs in something else. I go through a longer presentation on venture capital where I talk about my experience. I spent 10 years as a venture capital investor. It's my full-time job. Now it's a hobby. And we divide the world into 3 categories: candy, vitamins, and painkillers. And we like to invest in painkillers. In fact, we like to invest in addictive painkillers, because then the customer keeps coming back for more. So if what you've got is candy, and honestly, most of the 99-cent or 2 real apps on these things are candy. It's interesting. This is kind of back to your question about Silicon Valley. A lot of what Silicon Valley is doing is candy. It's not real. Look for painkillers. Or you're in an area where not enough customers care. So this is what you need to do when you're with your value proposition, is very clearly state what's the problem, what's the ecosystem, what's the competition, what's the technology in sight, what's the market size, and so forth. So this is a set of disciplines that if you work yourself through this list, you can very quickly decide, do you have a real value proposition, or do you have an idea for a product you want to build? And if all you've got is an idea for a product you want to build, stop. Stop right there. Don't do that. Come back, start trying to answer these questions. And probably the most important one for a startup is why now? What has happened in the world? What has happened with technology? What has happened with the market? What has happened with the legal system? What has happened with something out there that makes now the right time to launch this product? And I can give longer examples, but I launched a product with one of my startups, which was a tablet-based home healthcare nursing system where nurses could track all of the data necessary to take care of a patient at home for injections and things like that. Had very good medical outcomes, had very good administrative outcomes, saved a lot of money for the hospitals. Except that I launched that tablet-based process in 1999. And the tablet computers in 1999 simply weren't ready. I was having to plug it into the wall because you couldn't get a cellular modem. There wasn't any Wi-Fi back then. It was too early. So what you need to do is figure out what's happening in the marketplace to figure out why what you're doing makes sense right now.
Can you give an example? Our product would be a candy, a vitamin, painkiller, an addictive painkiller?
Yeah, I have to get out of this sequence because it's another presentation that I give. Candy is honestly most of what's out there on the iPhone. Being able to check in and tell your friends where you're drinking. College students tend to like apps like that, but honestly, nobody really cares. There's not a lot of value in that. Vitamin is taking something that exists, and let's say again, let's try to work with an app. Let's just say an online banking app that lets your bank or lets you access your bank better than you could by telephone. Well, it doesn't change the world, but it's useful, and you can actually make some money on that. So that's useful. And then a painkiller is something which, I have a huge need. I need to be able to see my customer relationships in real time. And again, I'm sticking with apps. On my phone. And if I don't have it here, I have to call someone back at my office and work through their desktop interface over a phone call to figure it out. That's a painkiller. That's worth $20 a month to me to have a service like that. So the more social it is, the more it's likely to be candy. The more business process related it is, the more it's likely to be a painkiller. And again, if it's one where instead of just paying $20 or 40 reais for it, if I have to pay 40 reais for it every month, that makes it addictive. Then it's a subscription model, and I sell you once, and I collect money every month. Does that help? Okay. More questions? Okay. Let's see. I went through that. Second one, way over on the right there, is customer segments. Customer segments are people. Customer segments are people. Who are they? Why would they buy from you? So these are not companies. And this is a problem, this is a mistake most people make with their canvas, is they'll say that their customer segment is automotive companies. No, you can't sell to an automotive company. You can't sell to Volkswagen. If you have a purchasing manager for the fabrics that go into the seat cushions of Volkswagen vehicles, that's a person. And you need to find out what that person needs, why what they're doing now doesn't work, and how to focus on that. But a customer segment is people. And by the time you finish this iterative process, you'll have names for these people. You'll know who they are. You may not have met them yet. That can be hard, but you at least know who they are. But a segment is people, individual people, not companies. Need to understand, again, back to painkillers, what are some pains? This is relevant to your question on painkillers. What takes too much money? Why is there current, you can read all this, why is it underperforming? What is it about it that is an existing product that's a challenge for them? What's keeping them awake at night? Why are they concerned about losing their job? Why are they not adopting new technologies? For example, mine that was doing a tablet-based computing system in 1999. What kept them from adopting it is the tablets didn't work in 1999. I should have asked these questions in 1999. I didn't. I lost a lot of money. What makes your customers feel bad? People like to feel good. If they feel bad about their job, they feel like they're not doing something well. Even if it's just an irritation or a headache, what can you find that makes them unhappy, and what's their risks? What is it that they're concerned about that technology can reach in and help them with? So ask those questions. And again, once you've got a name or at least an archetype or a picture of what that person looks like, and start asking these questions, you can really start narrowing down on value prop, and you can start narrowing down on customer segments. Third is the channels. How do you sell it? And again, I'm going through this really fast. I apologize. But how do you get it? And what is the way it gets from where you have it to the customer? Sometimes that's physical. It has to go on a truck. Sometimes that's virtual. It goes over the internet or over the web or over mobile channels, what have you. But how does it get there, and why are those people going to pay attention to you? This is a really, really good slide that I'm going to skip. So download it and go. This is actually a grid that Steve Blank goes into. But his point is, okay, this is back to your comment about Silicon Valley. This is Silicon Valley, where the product is virtual and the channels are virtual. That's the second industrial revolution, because nobody needs to put anything on a truck. It turns out most of the world is in the other three quadrants here. And so you don't have to be in this quadrant, but Steve Blank thinks you should. He's wrong, but that's okay. He lives in Silicon Valley. He's biased. Relationships. This is a longer discussion, But there's three things you've got to do with customers. First, you got to get some. Once you get them, you got to keep them. Once you've kept them, you use them to grow more. And all three of those are really important. It's not enough to get them, you got to keep them. And once you keep them, you have to find more. So get, keep, grow. If you find the first few and keep them, they'll help you grow because they're going to want to be seen by their peers in their community as, hey, I was the first one to adopt the XYZ 2000, and it really worked well for my company. You should use that too. People like to be first as long as it works. These four will take most of your time in the customer discovery process. Just getting those right is a lot of work. A lot of work, weeks of work, weeks of work. And that's one of the things that we were talking about during the break is going out there and doing those 100 interviews and having those 100 conversations, especially for those of us who are engineers, is really hard. You've all heard the joke about introverted and extroverted engineers, right? Introverted engineers looks at his shoes when he's talking to you. And extroverted engineers looks at your shoes when he's talking to you. So I'm an extroverted engineer. You know, I look at your shoes. But it's hard. And it's usually not our core skill because we like to be in front of keyboards. That's what we do. We're really good at it. But you can't do this in front of a keyboard. You just can't. Human beings don't work that way. But those four are really frequently this iterative process where you're validating that a customer exists, and you really have not yet talked about your unique advantages, your unique technologies, your cost of goods, your financing. You haven't talked about any of those yet. You've simply tried to validate, is there a customer out there, and if so, what would the channels be and what problems would you be solving? I know Winston Churchill, most important man of the 20th century. Success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. Sir Winston didn't know it, but that's the code of an entrepreneur. You're going to wind up failing a lot. Except it's not really failing, it's learning. You're going to go around and around and around this process. As long as you're learning every time, it's not a failure. Now, if you're not learning, and if you're simply doing the same thing over again, and it keeps failing, well, that's an Albert Einstein quote. You know, insanity consists of doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Don't do that. But go ahead and feel free to go through this cycle as long as you're learning. And if you need to change, change. That's okay, because up till, I'm going to back up a slide. Up through this point, you haven't spent any money. You spent your time, and you may have had some expenses and phone calls and maybe airplane tickets if you're doing it for real. But you haven't really spent any money building a product or building a device or building a software. You've just been talking to people. Talking's free. You bought a lot of coffee, probably. Once you've pivoted or once you decide whether you need to pivot or not, then you can start talking about, is there money in it? So that's where revenue streams fit into the canvas. And again, revenue models are real simple. How does the company make money from each customer segment? Really simple. So let's look at the segments, figure out what the value is. How do you turn that into sales? How do you turn that into something that you can keep part of? Key resources, now you start getting specific to you. Why are you so special? Why is your technology so special? So this is your people, this is intellectual property. Do you have a building? Do you have equipment? Do you have something like that? And do you have ways of financing this? Some of this is more relevant to later stage companies, but the questions are valid for any stage of company. What's special about your situation that makes it interesting? But you haven't asked that till step 6 out of 9. That was not step 1, that was step 6. Yeah, people like to start here, right? Yeah, no, wrong. No, you should be months into the process where you start talking about this stuff. Because nobody cares about this stuff yet. Until you know that there's a problem that can be solved and people who are willing to pay for solving it, then the fact that you're a really bright coder with a couple of patents, nobody cares. There's a lot of really bright engineers out there with a lot of really good patents, and nobody cares. So there's a reason this is step 6. You don't get to this for a while. Finishing up, partners. Startups are a team sport. Nobody can do it by themselves, nobody. So you have to have partners, you have to have friends. And who are they? Are they suppliers? Are they joint ventures? Are they customers? Are they people that are going to acquire you someday? Are they people that you're going to acquire someday? What is the relationship with these key partners? And you may not have some of these yet because you're a startup. And maybe you're identifying that you want to have Volkswagen as a partner. Well, how do you get to the point where Volkswagen is going to be a partner? But you need to identify the need for them. But again, this is step 7 out of 9. This is not step 1. Activities, again, engineers want to start with activities. This is step 8. So don't start with step 8. But once you get to this point, what are the important things you've got to do? If you've done this process right, if you've actually followed the steps and you've gone through the 100 interviews, this is easy. It actually is obvious. It's as simple as typing. You just type it because you'll know it. Because all the thought process went in over on this part of the canvas. But if you start off here, you're doomed. Sorry, but you are. This is where you start off, or this is where you wind up saying, okay, now that we know what the problem is, who the customers are, what the channels are going to be, what the partnerships are going to be, what the key resources are, what do we do to put it all together? It's obvious. Then you just type it up. It's very, very, very simple. And then only at the end do you really start worrying about cost structure. And only at the end do you figure out, what are my fixed costs versus variable costs, what's my profit margin, things like that. This is the classic MBA stuff, okay? Classic management stuff. And it's important, but you don't start with it. Because until you know everything else, you can't do this because you don't know what to put in your spreadsheets. And if you fill out the spreadsheets on day 1, you're making it up. I used to do that all the time. I thought that was my job, was to make stuff up, to put it into spreadsheets, to make the numbers look good, and then to try to make the real world match my spreadsheets. The real world is a lot bigger than my spreadsheets. It's a whole lot easier to make my spreadsheets match the real world. I didn't know that for a long time, and neither did anybody else. So that's why this comes last. I just rattled through about a 3-hour Steve Blank lecture in 12 minutes. We okay? Okay. Those of you who have not watched them online from udacity.com, you should. He's better at it than I am. But there is a lot of value in going through each of those steps and going through them in order. I want to switch gears for a second. Back to the extroverted engineer. Telling your story is really important, and it's something a lot of engineers especially are pretty bad at. Let me give you a couple of examples. How many people have heard of the elevator pitch? Heard of it? Okay. So, all right, you've asked questions, you're on the spot. What's an elevator pitch?
Elevator pitch is when you meet some CEO or some important people on the elevator, and you have only 3-5 minutes to show, or I don't know how big the building is. You have the time. I don't know if you have. If you have a building with 100 meters, you have maybe 7 minutes to convince a CEO the value of your ideas.
That's exactly right. This has actually happened to me. I have been pitched in elevators. I have been pitched in men's bathrooms. That's kind of embarrassing, actually. People, look, when you're a venture capitalist, you have a checkbook, people will pitch you. People will come and ask you stuff. So, yeah, you don't get 7 minutes, but you get about 30 seconds. You can probably get 30 seconds with just about anybody if you hang out at the right conferences and do the right things. You got to be ready to tell your story in 30 seconds. The other one, how many people have been to events like this? Yikes. I go to these all the time. I don't have to buy food. I just eat chicken fingers at these. These are crowded events where everyone's coming together to network and swap business cards. And again, you have to be able to tell your story really quickly. And the fundamental question is, so what do you do? What do you say? Don't start wandering around with a long, complicated story that you haven't thought through, because they'll start turning this way and they'll ask the next person, so what do you do? And they'll ignore you. They're not being rude. It's just human nature. You need to craft a really strong opening sentence. The wrong time to do this is when you're walking into the event. You need to spend some time on this, back at your desk, thinking about it, and putting something together. There's lots of ways of doing it. If you have a good one, do that. If you don't have a good one, this is one. My company, whatever the name is developing something to help someone solve some problem with my secret. Does secret sauce translate into Portuguese? Okay, so this is what I've got better than anybody else in the world. So, this is my company developing something to help someone solve some problem with secret sauce. And you can get through that very, very quickly. And if you've got that, whether you're in the elevator or the networking pitch or wherever you are, you can actually work your way through that very well. Sound simple? That's not simple. That's actually a lot of work. That's actually a lot of work to get that right. So let's step through it. My company name. Boy, do people pick stupid company names. You got to be able to pronounce it. You got to be memorable. I used to say you have to be able to spell it. Now I also say it has to be Googleable. If you can't find it on Google, it doesn't exist. So work on a company name that actually fits these criteria. There's also the whole aspect of multiculturalism and thinking about your name in other languages. How many people ran into this company a couple weeks ago? Yeah, they launched a big new app in America, and they actually looked it up in dictionaries, but it didn't actually have the meaning in Portuguese that you actually use. So Dorego helps keep track of your favorite places. They suddenly found a lot of people in Brazil were signing up for their app. They really weren't sure why. So be careful with your company names. Okay. Developing something. Okay, you are going to know more about this something than the person you're talking to. Dial it down. Bring it back to something really simple. If you're using an acronym or an abbreviation at this point, you're doing it wrong. So no fancy language. Assume, that there's people on the other end that don't know as much about it as you do. Don't use a lot of adjectives. And where do you get that from? From the canvas. If you did your canvas right, you just suck your main value proposition out of box 1 of the canvas. That's what goes into that slot. Another reason to do the canvas. What are we who are we developing it for? The customer segment? Off the canvas. Second box. Identify them. Tell them who they are. Be very specific. Make sure that there's somebody who can actually buy it. And again, not that I'm going to sell it to Volkswagen. I'm going to sell it to the parts buyer who buys fabric for seats at Volkswagen, or something like that. But be very, very specific. So again, once you've done the canvas, this starts getting simpler. Problem statement, value prop again. Pull it out of the value prop. Here's the problem we're trying to help them with. What's our secret sauce? That's way over here. Key resources, key activities. Why you, why now? And again, you can just take that straight off your finished canvas and plug that into the elevator pitch sentence. So if you've done the canvas right, which is a lot of work, and then you sit and think about this, you can actually get a very compelling, strong sentence to explain what it is that your company does which then you should be able to rattle off in any conversation. And if somebody wakes you up from a sound asleep and shines a flashlight in your eyes and says, "What do?" you should be able to say this without thinking about it. Because you're going to be able to say that on short notice with anybody you run into. Now, the objective of a lot of these networking events and elevator pitches and things like that is to get to a meeting. The very best sort of meeting is you and somebody that you need to get something from, be it money or a customer relationship or recommendation or knowledge or whatever. You and that person and 2 cups of coffee. That's the best. It turns out we've decided in Western civilization that we don't want to do that anymore. We want to look at PowerPoint slides. I don't know why, because they're not very useful, but we all do it. So if you get to a meeting, they're probably going to want you to plug in a projector and show some slides. Somebody give some rules about that. I've been doing this a long time. I've been doing presentations, I've been doing this a long time. I mean, more than 30 years. And I've learned some things. And it's not just me. I mean, I've learned it from a lot of different places. This stuff works. When you're putting your slide deck together, follow these rules. You want very few words. 0 is okay. If your slides consist just of photographs, okay, talk. Very big fonts, this is good, less complexity, lots of pictures. Here's an example. This is, if you care, the Integrated Defense Acquisition Technology and Logistics Lifecycle Management System of the Defense Acquisition University. Somebody actually thought they were doing their job. Oh my gosh. What a horrible, horrible, horrible travesty. Don't do that. Engineers love things like this because we want to put all the possible details on the slide. And if I'm receiving a pitch and I see one of those, what do? Oh my goodness. I don't want to know about this. Here's another example. You can assume this slide conveys critically important information. Unfortunately, it's too wordy. People who create slides tend to put every word they're going to say on their slides. I'm sorry, Danielle, you don't need to read all this. Way too many words. Way too many words. Here's a couple of tricks. One, okay, I already speak too fast in English, but I speak at about 150 words per minute. Most people speak about 120. I read at 1,200 words a minute. So I can read 10 times faster than you can talk. And if all you're doing is reading me what's on your slides, I'm going to figure that out. And by about the 3rd slide, about the time that you've spoken to here, I've read to here. And then what am I doing? I'm doing this. I'm reading my mail, I'm checking Facebook, I'm posting on Twitter, I'm doing something. If you create slides like this in front of me and my partners, what do? Double. Don't do those. Don't ever do those. How many people have heard of the 30-point rule, 30-point type? A couple of you? Guy Kawasaki. That's 30 points. These are good. Everything smaller than that is a mistake. And that's for anything on your slide, including labeling the charts, the diagrams. Anything on your slide that's smaller than 30 points is a mistake. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, if you're putting smaller text than that on your slides, you're putting too much information on your slides. And I can't absorb that much information off a slide, so you need to be talking to me about it. The other is, I'm old, I wear glasses, I have bad eyes, I can't read that. So if you put a whole lot of 18-point text on your slide, and I'm sitting in an audience at about your distance, and I can't read it, what am I doing? I'm not paying attention to you, and you're wasting your time. And you're wasting your time. Yeah.
What do you think about putting reference on graphs? Like, it must be a smaller font? Do you think it's good to put a reference? Like, where did you got that graph or something?
A reference on a slide. Okay, there's slides you're going to project on a screen, and then there's slides you're going to print out and leave behind or send somebody as a PDF. For the ones that only live on screen, you don't really need a reference. For the ones you're going to leave behind, yeah, you can do small type for that, but you know that's not something that anybody needs to focus on. That's really acknowledging that I got this from some place. But if you're putting footnotes on your slides, you're probably doing them wrong. You need to have compelling enough statements. You don't need to have footnotes.
I mean, like you put a graph, and I think like investors want to see, like, oh, how did you get this info? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again, when I'm standing in front of it, I should tell you where I got it. If you leave it behind, yeah, there's a reason to put a reference of some sort in smaller print, but not for something that you expect them to read in the audience. So, yeah, the document you leave behind doesn't have to be the same as the one you put on the wall. Other questions on that? 30 points are real important. It's hard to do. It's hard to do because you want to squeeze all this stuff in there, and you can't do it. You need to keep it really short. Let me give you an example. I used to be in the venture capital business. I got time for this. I used to be in the venture capital business. And let's say that we had, this clock is 11:20. Let's say that we had an appointment at 11 o'clock, and you were going to come pitch your company to me as a venture capital investor. And let's say that I get there at 11:03 because I'm late. We spend a couple of minutes talking about the weather and the wonderful view out of the office window and whatever. And then, at about 11:05, you make a terrible, terrible mistake. My company was called ATV Ventures. Don't worry about it, it's not important, but it's ATV. You make a terrible mistake. You say, so Stephen, tell me about ATV Ventures. I'm a venture capitalist. By definition, I have an ego as big as all outdoors. I will start telling you about ATV Ventures. I will tell you about the deals that we've done. I'll tell you about the exits that we've had. I'll tell you about the IPOs we've done. I'll tell you about the investors we've co-invested with. I'll tell you about the technologies we're interested in. I will rattle on for probably about 20 minutes on ATV Ventures because I'm proud of it. Our meeting's still going to end at 12. You just blew a third of your time. Okay? Now, if instead, after I was late and we validated your parking and we exchanged pleasantries, you said, Stephen, I've done a lot of research on ATV Ventures. I understand you're interested in my sort of technology. In fact, you've invested in these two companies that I think are very relevant, and I think that would be a good mix, a good fit for your portfolio, and we want you on our board of directors. That took about 1 minute. What you've done in that 1 minute, first, you skipped me using a third of your time because you learned all that on the internet. Secondly, you've shown me that you did your homework. You've shown me that you've actually done enough research to know how you would fit into my portfolio, or let's say I'm not a venture capitalist, say I'm Volkswagen, how you would fit into Volkswagen's supply chain, or whoever it is you're talking to. But you've done enough homework that suddenly I'm no longer doing this, and I'm looking at you. I'm saying, wow, I need to pay attention to this person. Now, once you've got my attention, we're still going to end at noon, right? Because I got plans. But now we're at about here. If you can give your pitch in about 15 minutes, maybe 20, don't take the whole hour. Because if you do a good job, I'm going to have lots of questions. And you should allow time for lots of questions. If you do a bad job, I'll say thank you and you leave early, and you know that you did a bad job. But if you do a good job, I'm going to have time for questions, and you can't use the whole time showing your slides. You should get to the end and have a lot of time left for me to ask questions. Questions on that? Okay. I'm going to show one particular example of how to structure a presentation. There's as many ways to structure it as there are companies. This one isn't right, but this one certainly isn't wrong. And if you don't have a structure for your presentation, whether it's for this competition or whether when you're doing it for real, this one works. Now, I'm stealing these slides for something I do in the States, and I call it the baker's dozen. And my wife went through these slides with me and said, what? So anybody understand the concept of baker's dozen? No, okay. If you go to a bakery in the States and you buy a dozen cookies, you get 13. Because in case one breaks, they don't want you coming back and complaining you didn't get your full dozen. So a baker's dozen means 13. So if you get 13, if you get a dozen cookies or a dozen muffins or a dozen loaves of bread, you're going to wind up getting 13. So a baker's dozen means 13. This is my baker's dozen structure for a presentation. And if you need more than 13 slides, you're doing it wrong. You can actually get, I also do one of these with 6, but you certainly don't need more than 13. Because I can pitch a company to go public in 13 slides. So anyhow, you get 13, no more. This one sounds stupid. Include your contact information on the first page. Because slide decks have a life of their own, and they get passed around from place to place, and maybe somebody will send one to me and say, hey, Stephen, I saw these guys at such and so an event, and I don't like them much, but I thought you might. And I'll look at it and say, wow, that's really cool. I really would like that. How do I get in touch with them? Duh. No phone number, no email, no web address, no Twitter. Maybe a company name, but if you didn't make a company name I can Google successfully, I can't find you that way. Oh, well, it was good, but throw it away. Put all that information on the first page. Doesn't take up any space. Now you start using the canvas again. Again, if you've done the canvas right, this stuff gets simple. Now, we're taking them out of sequence, okay? We're starting towards the end. I'm going to start with key resources because that's people. And the first thing I want to know is who the heck are you? And why are you standing in front of me? And why should I pay attention? So spend some time up front talking about your team. Who are you? Who are the people? Why are they special? Overview is really where are you in the customer discovery process. So, you know, are you here? Are you here? Are you here? Are you here? You know, where are you? Have you pivoted? Where'd you start? Just some history about, you know, where do I place you in my mental map of all the companies that I talk to? You know, how do you fit into that? Okay, so now I know where you are now. Okay, so you validated a customer segment, and you know you're ready to really start building out, and you maybe got a prototype, but you need some cash to get from here to here. Okay, I got that. I know how to do that. Okay, so you know now I figured that part out. Now these three kind of go together. You know, this is really that block of 4 in the top right-hand part of the canvas. Just summarize that. What's the problem? What's the solution? What's the value? And again, if you can do that just with photographs rather than a whole bunch of words, that's a good idea. But use that canvas to get to problem, solution, and value. Secret sauce gets one of its very own. This is back to key resources, but now it's no longer, you use key resources for team, now you're also using it for what's your secret. In other words, why you, or why now, or why this? Most of the smart people in the world aren't you. You're smart, but most of the smart people aren't you. And if they're smart and they're doing stuff, why are you going to win this? And what's your secret? So that takes some focus. That kind of translates into advantages. And again, you know, the right-hand side of the page, you know, shows why are we going to be able to do this when no one else can, or we can do it better, or we can do it faster, or what have you. Strategy is all about channels and relationships. How are we going to get this out there? How are we going to sell this? How are we going to get value for it? What's our business model? That's the whole thing. How do we make money? How do we exchange what we're doing for value, where we create value for our enterprise and value for, again, for the clients, then for the employees, then for me. And really, for the purpose of this, it's the clients and the company. You get 1 page of financials, no more. It should be, again, 30-point type in an Excel spreadsheet. You don't get very many rows, okay? You can't put down a 72-row spreadsheet here. You get maybe 8 or 9 rows in 30-point type. So it's going to be really, really simple version. You know, what are your financial projections? What are your costs? You know, what's your revenue look like? So that can be very, very simple or simplified. Big mistake a lot of people fail when they're doing something like this. What are you asking for? Why do we have this meeting? Why did I just spend the last 20 minutes of my life listening to you? What do you want? Do you want money? Do you want an introduction? Do you want advice? Are you recruiting for an employee or a set of employees? Are you trying to find a client? Do you need to license some technology from my university? Are you stealing technology from my university? You want to tell me so I don't sue you? I mean, why are we having this meeting? So what's the requirement? So, and again, that comes straight off the canvas. And that's key relationships. And then the last one is the closer, is the sentence that you started off with. You know, my company is developing something to help someone solve some problem with secret sauce. Write it down. Put it on the last slide. That and your logo is your last slide. That's a good pitch. That's a very effective pitch. Okay, I promised to be done by 12. I'm going to run a little bit late. If somebody needs to sneak out to get to class or something at 12 o'clock, I'm not going to be offended, but I'm going to run a couple minutes over. Yeah.
I wonder if you are not very concerned about your how you monetize your plan. How you monetize, how you get money, how you charge, or how you're going to.
That's all
I understand that the model you show the whole canvas, but what will be the stream of?
On the slide for model. Yeah, monetization is part of that, but it's more than that. I mean, you need to talk about monetization, but basically you need to talk about how are we going to create value that someone's going to pay us for. Is that mine? I'm sorry. I thought this was in silent. Go away. Shush. Yeah, I'm a geek. Star Trek, sorry. Credibility, right? I'm one of you. Yeah, I think that is, monetization is a key part of that, but it's more than that. It's really how are you going to create enough value that you actually make something out of it. So, but if you called it monetization, you wouldn't be right. Again, this isn't the only right answer, but this is a structure to think about. Adjust it. I mean, do what's right for your business, but hit these items. Okay, I'm going to give some examples and then talk about I-Core. Which I promised to do a while ago. Execution. Thomas Edison, vision without execution is hallucination. Don't hallucinate. Show me how you're going to execute. I gave you a button earlier. We're not in the Valley. That's okay. We don't need to be in Silicon Valley. You don't have to be in Silicon Valley. There's good things elsewhere. I have a lot of friends in Silicon Valley. I've learned a lot from Silicon Valley. I've made some money in Silicon Valley. And there's things we can do. It's like what worked in Silicon Valley. So what's that? The garage. Anybody recognize it? It's the garage. That's where Hewlett-Packard was founded. That was the beginning of Silicon Valley in the 1940s. That was what happened as they formed their company in that garage. I give a long presentation about what we learned from Silicon Valley, which I'm not going to go through here today, but you need all of these things. This is what makes a technological ecosystem work, whether it's in Silicon Valley, or whether it's in Atlanta, or whether it's in Campinas, or whether it's in Johannesburg. Doesn't matter. Get these things right, your ecosystem gets very healthy very quickly. Get any significant fraction of these things wrong, it's not going to happen. Not going to happen. I'm not going to go through them all. I do like to focus on the last one of continuous replenishment of bright young people and of bright new ideas. That's actually where universities fit in. It's very difficult to have a healthy innovation ecosystem without a good research technological university in the middle of it. In fact, I don't think it's possible. So you can do that here, you can do that in Atlanta, you can do other places. I talked about Georgia Tech. I'm going to go real fast through these. We rank really well. Yay, Georgia Tech. We're good at a lot of things. These are actually now, these are NSF slides. So these slides come from the National Science Foundation. And this is actually how we run the NSF I-Corps program that we teach to professors and teams from universities around the United States. A team is always, for I-Corps, this isn't true for every company, but for I-Corps, a team is 3 people. A team is a professor, a grad student, and a mentor. And in the I-Corps model, the graduate student or the postdoc, either one, the graduate student or postdoc is expected to be the entrepreneurial lead. The professor is not expected to be the entrepreneurial lead because they're really bad at it. And then the mentor is somebody from the outside community who will help them, usually with business advice and strategy. So when we run the program for I-Corps, again, these are their slides, what does it take to go from an idea to a business? You've got the model and development, you've got the hypothesis testing, and get out of the building. That's the magic of I-Corps. Those 3 things is really what we do in the 7-week program. This would be me presenting to the professors and grad students, creating the pressures of a real startup. Our expectations are unreasonable. Now remember, when I'm doing this with I-Corps, I'll have 25 teams of 3 people each, so a room of 75 people, so about this size, of which a third of them are professors, most of whom have tenure, and they've not really been criticized in 20 years. And I'm going to criticize them for making mistakes. They're not used to that. So we try to warn them that, we really expect extraordinary effort and we expect full participation. And most of the teams that have dropped out of I-Corps is because the professor can't handle it. The grad student, who's the entrepreneurial lead, is fine, the mentor is fine, the professor's saying, this is hard and you're telling me I'm wrong and I don't like that and I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to play. No. Poof, gone. Kick you out. Kick you out. I-Corps is okay with failure as long as you learn. It's okay with iterations and pivots as long as you learn. It is very much a laboratory class. We do lectures for 3 days and then we stop. We do give no lectures after day 3. Then it's all about coming back every week and giving what you, the company, has learned, and it's all about fail fast and learning quick. Because one of the issues with research-based startups is you can go for a couple of years before figuring out that your idea is a bad idea. With I-Corps, we try to find that out in 7 weeks. And so far, we've got a pretty good track record of finding out in 7 weeks, is this worth proceeding with or not? Again, this is me talking to professors. We're tough, direct. We try to be fair. We want them to succeed. We're not smarter than they are in terms of the technology. We have seen more startups than they have, but we're not going to pretend to understand their domain better than they do. That's their job. Again, no facts. I've said this part, get out of the building. And that is between hallucination and vision is execution, getting out of the building and actually doing the work. And again, some people don't like to do hard work. Most of the time is spent outside of the office. And again, this is where a lot of professors fall off. It is a lot of work, and if they can't commit the time, or actually, this is being polite, if you think you can't commit the time, it also turns out, if we don't think you're committing the time, your NSF program manager will kick you out of the program. Keep in mind, these teams are getting $50,000 to participate. They're not paying, they're receiving $50,000 to participate. We expect them to work for it. So every week, 10-minute presentation, or excuse me, every 10 minutes per company, 5-minute presentation, 5 minutes of critique. We use this Launchpad Central software, which is really just an online version of the business model canvas. Tens of hours outside the building, and then there's a final week where everybody comes and says what they learned, both about their technology and about their potential startup. And again, every week, get out of the building, do a lot of hypothesis testing, update the canvas, and discuss. So after the first week, which is lectures, We do this for 6 weeks. It is amazing what can be accomplished in 6 weeks if you do this right. It's absolutely amazing. It's also a huge amount of work. As of last Friday, here's the numbers that we have. 171 awards, that's teams, so that's 3 times 171 is 400 and some odd people have been through the program. As I said, 160 out of 171 have pivoted to change their business model, so pretty much everybody who walked in the door said, no, our idea was wrong. 41 states in the union out of 50, this is internal SBIR awards. 5 of them have raised money so far, which is actually not a bad ratio from angels and venture capital. And one of them has actually been bought. Caltech startup Anchovy Labs got bought by Dropbox. I'm going to spend 3 minutes on 5 slides on Anchovy. The reason I can do that is they got bought and nobody cares anymore, so all of their presentations are now public. So I'm going to go through their original canvas and what happened. So we're going to talk about Anchovy. This is A, too small to read, that's not 30-point type, and B, it doesn't matter. I don't want you to know what Anchovy did. I want you to understand the general process of what happened here. They walked in from Caltech, pretty good school, Caltech, and they had done their homework and they had read the books before the program started, and they walked into the canvas that looked like this. They went through the lectures, they went through their first week of customer discovery, of talking to 15 potential customers, and in their first week, they came back with that. Everything they thought they knew was wrong. And they started over. By the 3rd week, they'd gotten to this point. Whoops, what did I do? I pressed the wrong button. By the 3rd week, they'd gotten to this point. They added some things by the 5th week, and by the end, they'd actually gotten to something which looked pretty real. Almost no words are on this page that were on the page from 7 weeks earlier. All the customer segments are different, all the customer benefits are different, all the key resources, all the key activities are different. It was the same team, the same patent, the same technology, everything else changed. That worked. That's okay. If it hadn't been for I-Core, that would have taken them 2 years and $2 million. We figured it out in 7 weeks for $50,000. It's a huge, huge improvement. We're short on time, but I want you to watch this. This is the only video I've got. Let me crank my volume up. I'm just going to hold the mic to it. These are about 5 of the teams that went through I-Core talking about what it was like, and these tend to be the professors or the grad students. The mentors are not doing this video.
When I first started the program, I wasn't really sure it was going to be worth the effort. It was clearly going to be a lot of effort, and it was only for $50K. On the other hand, it seemed to really offer the opportunity for us to move forward with our technology. Knowing what I know now, I realized the program really isn't about money at all, and it was really a very valuable experience, and it encouraged me to do things that I certainly could have done, but it gave me a little extra spur to get out of the building and do the things that really had to be done. And I know for a fact that I wouldn't have done that by myself. It wasn't quite the business model we had going in, but now we feel quite confident that we can move forward with the technology.
I was trying to commercialize the smart menu technology before the I-Core program started, and things that I was doing seemed right, but I just didn't have the right framework or language to talk about those things. We went back to the existing handful of customers that we had before the program started, and we asked them new questions based on the language that we had learned from the program. And that got us answers that I'd never expected or I hadn't received from them, even though we were working with them for the last couple of months.
Irrespective of whether my company succeeds or not, I'm going to use this paradigm in my research.
This class actually changed my perspective in knowing that succeeding is not always just about the product.
And what we've learned through going through the I-Core program was the importance of really understanding your customers and understanding the market that you're going into. And the value of the I-Core program has been to give us a framework and a structure and a methodology for systematically going out and talking to customers and partners and key opinion leaders to help develop the right strategy for the business which we're now launching.
We're more attuned to the market now, and we're starting further along the development path than we would have otherwise. Thank you for being a great group to work with.
And for our translator booth, that was really unfair. That was meant to be incredibly compressed, and I've got no clue what you were able to translate, but I hope that the message got across. These were professors and grad students that were somewhat skeptical about getting out of the building and talking to people, and at the end of the process, they're our biggest fans. And most of the subsequent classes for I-Corps have come from recommendations from previous members that have said, you need to go do this. So, I'm going to give some examples and then I'll shut up, or I'll answer questions till we can. I think I've actually already mentioned this one. This is one of our professors at Georgia Tech. This is Ajit, is a brilliant man. He's been building solar cells for 30 years. He's a wonderful individual and a wonderful researcher and a terrible manager. So had we tried to build a company with him as CEO, it would have been a disaster. So we didn't. We made a company with him as chief scientist, which he's really good at, and we found a CEO, and we found some money, and we found a factory that was empty, and we're now building solar cells. Norcross is a suburb of Atlanta. We're now building solar cells in Atlanta when everyone said all that business is going to go to China. Well, this one didn't because it's right next door to Georgia Tech. So that's wearing my economic development hat. That's 200 well-paying jobs in my state that exist because of what we do. I'm not going to go through all these in detail, but again, Pindrop went through our Venture Lab process, our Flashpoint process, ATDC process. Flashpoint is like I-Corps, but inside of Georgia Tech. And again, they went from thinking they knew that they had a company to finding something that people really cared about. They initially were going to sell it to consumers. It turned out they want to sell it to banks for a lot of money because banks have a lot more money than consumers do. And they've now raised a bunch of money, and they've got customers that are major U.S. banks, and they're doing very, very well. Whisper, again, is a technology company coming out of our electrical engineering department. Again, went through the process, is now signing up both financial institutions and actually also government agencies for things that are classified we can't talk about. This is the one I was actually talking about, the metal organic frameworks, building better sensors, and again, taking milligram quantities to kilogram quantities. And this one actually went through the I-Corps process, and they're getting ready to launch a real business. Then Ayana actually came to us from NASA, and Ayana, and so this is a typical team. Ayana is a professor. Haywan is a graduate student, and Roberto is on my staff as the mentor. Those three went through the process with a company called Tab Access, helping disabled people have better interaction with their environment. And again, they've now raised some money and are off to having a real company, which probably would not have happened without this. I will mention the two that went through I-Corps. I'm backing up one. They actually went through 108 contacts at Amondo Tech, and Tab Access 106. So yeah, they interviewed 106 different laboratories and potential customers throughout the process in 6 weeks. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I will answer questions until I'm told to shut up. So, questions and comments. I'll leave this up on the page, A, because, oops, hang on, here we go. A, because I like the picture of the car in the back, and B, it's got the address if you ever want to download these slides. There it is on my website.